Now, in the cases of developed countries that have industrial resources to provide a more stable income to the country, and have the funds and money to be able to develop a clean energy technology, in the long run that's a very viable solution. But in the case of developing nations, which you mentioned, even if we could use solar energy, wind energy, and other forms of non-renewable energy, chances are that non-renewable and polluting sources will be much cheaper. So which incentives can developing nations be given to go green? Especially since most developing nations many times have sources of non-renewable energy from either gas, oil, coal, etc.
The incentive is precisely the carbon market. Because with the carbon market in place, a fossil fuel power plant is less efficient than a renewable power plant. Because you have to pay if you emit, while if you are clean, you receive a payment. So it becomes more profitable to build renewable plants in developing nations if you have a carbon market in place. How much efficient? Approximately 20 euros per ton of CO2 more efficient. This means that for every ton emitted of CO2, the carbon market requires a payment of about 20 euros, approximately. This number goes up and down. The carbon market is traded in the European Union emission trading system, and all the data that I'm mentioning now can be found in the World Bank report called State and Trends of the Carbon Market, 2010. This is an annual report that the World Bank prints with all the information about the carbon market. So the carbon market is the incentive that is needed to transform the fossil fuel infrastructure into renewable power plants. It makes fossil fuel plants more expensive and less profitable. It makes renewable power plants more effective and more profitable. In fact, right now, the coal industry is subsidized globally by about 300 billion, with B as in boy, US dollars a year. 300 billion US dollars a year. If we stop the subsidy to the coal industry, then fossil fuels become much less profitable and they become more costly and more undesirable, and renewable sources of power like wind and solar become more profitable and more desirable. At the end of the day, the solar plants will be purchased with the money that the fossil fuel plants will have to pay through the carbon market because they are over-emitting. And the $20 or 20 euros, that the carbon market requires for payment for emission of a ton of CO2 represents the damage to the world that ton of CO2 is causing. It's called an externality. So the carbon market simply charges for the externality that the fossil fuels producers are causing to the population, their own nations, and the world as a whole. That's the incentive that is needed. Quickly, I should mention, the developing nations don't trade in the carbon market, but there is a clean development mechanism that gives carbon credits to those projects in the soil of developing nations. For example, building a clean power plant in a developing nation can get carbon credits, and those credits can then be taken and traded into the carbon market, the European Union emission trading system. So developing nations can build clean plants much less expensively now than they did before. Because while they're building those plants, the clean development mechanism gives them 20 euros approximately per ton credits that can be traded, adding to the profitable nature of those plants or making them less costly to build. So by removing the $300 billion subsidy to the carbon industry, the coal industry, and on the other hand, assigning carbon credits to clean power plants, we are changing the equation. All of a sudden, the clean power plants become less costly, more profitable, and the dirty ones become more costly and less profitable. I should mention that in the 5 years since the Kyoto Protocol became international law, already $50 billion dollars of clean development mechanism credits were given to private projects, not government, private projects in developing nations which decrease carbon emissions. And those projects decrease the equivalent of 20% of the European Union emissions in that period. So the system is working, and a lot of these clean development mechanism credits are changing the equation, making clean technology more profitable and less costly than dirty fossil fuel.
In the mix of all this WikiLeaks scandal, one of the released cables from the United States Embassy in Saudi Arabia said that Saudi Arabia's oil reserves may be overestimated by as much as up to 40%. Yemen, right to its south, is thought to become dry within the next 10 years and the next decade. At the same time, in Latin America, in Brazil, massive oil fields, recently the Libra field, were discovered, and this one particularly is calculated to have up to 15 million barrels of oil, while at the same time Venezuela surpassed Saudi Arabia as the country with the most oil reserves in the world. Do you think that there's any chance we might see in the near future a shift from the Middle East towards Latin America, South America as the center of oil production in the world?
Well, first of all, I am right now in the United States, and most of the oil imports of the United States don't come from the Middle East. They come from the Americas. The United States imports most of its oil from Mexico, Ecuador, Canada, and some from Venezuela, not from the Middle East. It's not the main source. So that shift has already occurred. Secondly, Venezuela is the nation who founded OPEC. So the role of Latin America and Latin America thinking in the oil market is historic. It's very old, not old, in the sense of centuries, but it goes back to the middle of last century, and it is a very important trend that has essentially organized the world economy around different principles. It's really led by Latin Americans. I should also mention that the carbon market is a Latin American creation. I would say an American creation because the lead negotiator of the Kyoto Protocol was Argentinian, Ambassador Raúl Estrada Urzuela, because the person who wrote the carbon market into the Kyoto Protocol, working with him, was another Argentinian, namely myself, and because in doing so we had great support from the United States Treasury, Larry Summers, and from the Department of State, being represented by Timothy Worth. The point I'm making is that the role of Latin America and the Americans as a whole in the oil market has been historic and critical, and it continues to be so. And in the creation of sustainability, basic needs, and the Kyoto Protocol, Latin America actually has the leaders. Together with the United States, curiously, the Kyoto Protocol is an American creation, even though it has been adopted and is run, the carbon market is run by the Europeans and the Japanese in the European Union emission trading system. So yes, I see Latin America as leaders. I see the role of Venezuela as a huge deposit, as extremely important. But the question is, do we want to lead in an industry that really should be finished because it creates more problems than it resolves. It is believed that by the year 2012, concentrated solar power plants are going to be as cost effective without any, just technologically, as coal plants. They require a little bit more know-how, but they're clean, and they have no political implications as the oil market and the political international issues connected to the oil economy. Because the sun is very democratic. The sun rays are all over the world, and it
Hello, Graciela? Hello? Dr. Chichilnisky? It seems we have lost the connection with Dr. Chichilnisky. We thank her very much for the interview. We're seeing if we can get back in touch with her. Thank you very much. Please visit us at 21stocks.com, and we'll see if we can get back in touch with Mrs. Chichilnisky, because she's a very important woman, and she has a lot of know-how, as we've seen here today. Thank you very much. My name is Andy Binker-Cosen.